I'm Jessica Harper, 32 years old, and my sister Ashley tried to have me murdered for $7 million. She hired a professional killer through the dark web, convinced that eliminating me would secure our grandmother's massive inheritance that should have been hers by birthright. What Ashley didn't anticipate was that I'd spent the last 3 years building connections in places she never imagined, learning skills she dismissed as worthless, and developing the kind of street intelligence that her Ivy League education never taught her. When I discovered her plan through digital breadcrumbs she was careless enough to leave behind, I realized I had two choices: become a victim or make sure she disappeared from my life permanently. The method I chose would shock even me, but sometimes survival requires playing a game your enemy never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Lake Oswego, Oregon, the Harper family looked like something straight out of a real estate brochure for successful suburban living. Our sprawling Tudor-style home sat on 2 acres of meticulously maintained grounds overlooking the Willamette River, complete with a private dock where our grandmother's vintage wooden boat bobbed gently against custom pilings. The circular driveway hosted a rotation of luxury vehicles that spoke to our family's prosperity, while floor-to-ceiling windows displayed tasteful interior design that magazines would feature in their homes of distinction section. Neighbors knew us as the family behind Harper & Associates Real Estate, the boutique firm that had dominated Portland's high-end property market for 3 generations, building wealth that transformed a modest 1960s startup into a multi-million-dollar empire. My mother, Carol Harper, ran the daily operations with the efficiency of a military commander and the social grace of someone born, understanding that appearances mattered more than authenticity. She could negotiate million-dollar commercial deals during morning coffee meetings, then seamlessly transitioned to hosting charity luncheons that raised substantial funds for causes she supported more for networking value than genuine passion. Her perfectly styled auburn hair never moved regardless of Portland's infamous weather, and her wardrobe consisted exclusively of pieces that photographed well for the society pages of Portland Monthly magazine. Carol had married into the Harper name and fortune, but she protected both with the ferocity of someone who understood exactly what she had gained and what losing it would cost. Dad represented the quieter side of success, a retired bank manager whose steady financial planning had helped grow the family assets while avoiding the flashy mistakes that destroyed other wealthy families during economic downturn. Tom Harper preferred his home office to public appearances, content to manage investment portfolios and tax strategies while Carol handled everything involving actual human interaction. His gray beard and wire-rimmed glasses gave him a professorial appearance that made clients trust his financial advice, though family members knew him better for his tendency to disappear into his workshop building intricate model ships that lined the shelves of his private sanctuary. He spoke in measured tones when he spoke at all, choosing words carefully as if verbal economy was another form of fiscal responsibility. Ashley embodied everything our parents valued in a daughter, checking every box that defined success in their social circle. 3 years older than me, she had graduated summa cum laude from Stanford before earning her law degree from Harvard, then returning to Portland to join one of the city's most prestigious corporate law firms as their youngest associate. Her marriage to Brad Williams, an investment banker whose family owned half of downtown Portland's commercial district, created the kind of power couple that appeared regularly in the Business Journal's social pages. Ashley's blonde hair stayed perfectly straight regardless of Oregon's humidity. Her designer suits fit like they were crafted specifically for her tall, athletic frame, and her confidence radiated the particular brand of entitlement that came from never experiencing genuine failure or rejection. Their Lake Oswego home resembled a smaller version of our childhood residence, complete with professional landscaping and imported Italian marble that cost more than most people's annual salary. Ashley drove a white BMW that she replaced every 2 years, not because the previous model had any problems, but because staying current with luxury trends was essential for maintaining her image among the firm's partners and their wives. She spoke 3 languages fluently, maintained memberships at the country club and tennis club, and could navigate Portland's complex social hierarchies with the skill of someone who had been groomed for exactly this life since childhood. By contrast, I had always been the family's question mark, the daughter whose choices consistently baffled parents who measured success through traditional metrics like advanced degrees and prestigious employment. After graduating from Portland State with a marketing degree that my family considered respectable but unimpressive, I had worked for 5 years at a mid-sized advertising agency, climbing the corporate ladder at a pace that satisfied me, but disappointed everyone else. My small apartment in the Pearl District reflected my different priorities, filled with vintage furniture I had restored myself and artwork from local artists, whose names wouldn't impress anyone at country club dinner. I preferred hiking boots to high heels, flannel shirts to business suits, and food trucks to five-star restaurants, choices that my family interpreted as evidence that I lacked the sophistication necessary for serious success. The pivotal moment in my relationship with traditional expectations arrived 3 years ago when I made the decision that would forever alter how my family perceived me. After watching the housing market crash and recover multiple times while working in marketing, I had begun to understand patterns that most people missed, recognizing opportunities in distressed properties that others saw only as liability. My savings account had grown steadily through careful budgeting and side projects, providing enough capital for a down payment on my first investment property, a rundown duplex in southeast Portland, that most buyers had dismissed as too much work for too little potential return. The renovation process taught me skills that no marketing degree had provided, from basic electrical work to project management, from contractor negotiations to permit navigation. I spent evenings and weekends learning everything about real estate investment, from analyzing cash flow potential to understanding neighborhood development patterns. The duplex transformation from eyesore to attractive rental property took 8 months of intensive work, but the monthly rental income it generated exceeded my previous salary within the first year. More importantly, the sense of accomplishment from building something tangible with my own hands felt more rewarding than any corporate promotion I had ever received. My parents' reaction to leaving a steady corporate job for real estate speculation ranged from bewildered to horrified. Carol worried about what her real estate colleagues would think about her daughter becoming a lowly property flipper, while Dad questioned the financial wisdom of abandoning guaranteed income for volatile investment returns. Ashley's response was more subtle but equally dismissive, asking pointed questions about my business plan and expressing concern about my ability to compete in markets where established professionals had decades of experience and extensive network. Her tone carried the particular condescension reserved for younger siblings, who ventured into territories where they clearly didn't belong. The criticism only intensified my determination to prove that my approach could succeed without traditional advantages like family connections or inherited client lists. My second property purchase was a foreclosed house in Selwood that required complete renovation but sat in a neighborhood showing signs of gentrification. The third was a small apartment building in southeast Portland that needed management improvements more than physical repair. Each project taught me different aspects of the business while building a portfolio that generated increasing monthly income and appreciation value. During this period, my relationship with grandmother Maggie began to evolve in ways that surprised both of us. Margaret Harper had founded Harper & Associates in 1962 with nothing but determination and a real estate license, building the company through decades of 12-hour days and calculated risks that paid off more often than they failed. By the time I was born, she had become Portland's premier luxury real estate broker, known for her ability to match wealthy clients with properties that perfectly suited their lifestyles and investment goals. Her own wealth had grown alongside the company's success, accumulated through shrewd property investments and business decisions that demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to anticipate market trends. Maggie had always maintained a certain distance from family members, perhaps as a way of protecting her business relationships from potential complications. But as I began sharing details about my real estate ventures during our traditional Sunday dinners, something in her demeanor shifted. She started asking probing questions about my renovation strategies, market analysis methods, and tenant screening processes. Her interest felt genuine rather than polite, and her advice carried the weight of someone who had navigated every possible real estate challenge during 6 decades in the business. These conversations gradually extended beyond Sunday dinners into private meetings at her downtown office, where she would review my project plans and offer suggestions that saved me both time and money. Maggie had an encyclopedic knowledge of Portland's development history, understanding which neighborhoods were positioned for growth and which had reached their peak potential. She introduced me to contractors who worked efficiently and honestly, lenders who offered competitive terms for investment properties, and city officials who could expedite permit processes that typically took months to navigate. More valuable than her professional connections was her willingness to share hard-earned wisdom about the psychological aspects of real estate success. Maggie understood that property investment was fundamentally about reading people and markets, recognizing opportunities that others missed, and timing decisions for maximum advantage. She had built her empire during an era when women in business faced obstacles that would be illegal today, developing strategies for overcoming gender-based discrimination while maintaining the professional relationships necessary for long-term success. Our growing relationship remained largely private, partly because Maggie preferred to keep family and business matters separate, but also because discussing my real estate education with someone besides my parents or Ashley would have generated questions about favoritism that could complicate family dynamics. Ashley had always assumed that she would inherit grandmother Maggie's business expertise along with her financial assets, given her legal background and traditional approach to career development. The possibility that Maggie might be grooming me for a different kind of inheritance never occurred to anyone, including me, until much later. Meanwhile, my property portfolio continued expanding through a combination of careful market analysis and calculated risks that paid off consistently enough to fund larger projects. By the end of my second year, I owned 6 rental properties that generated sufficient income to support my lifestyle while providing capital for additional investment. My approach focused on undervalued properties in neighborhoods with development potential, allowing me to buy below market value, improve the properties strategically, and benefit from both rental income and appreciation as the area's gentrify. The success. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This felt especially satisfying because it validated choices that everyone else had questioned. I had built something substantial without relying on family connections or traditional career paths, proving that alternative approaches could generate both financial security and personal fulfillment. My confidence grew with each successful project, and my willingness to take calculated risks increased as my understanding of market dynamics deepened. Ryan Chen entered my life during this period of rapid professional growth, meeting me at a real estate investment club meeting where he was presenting information about cybersecurity considerations for property management companies. His background in technology consulting had evolved into specialization in protecting real estate businesses from digital threats that were becoming increasingly sophisticated and costly. Ryan's presentation on data protection for tenant information and financial records demonstrated the kind of forward-thinking approach that impressed me, but his genuine interest in my investment strategies and renovation projects created the foundation for our personal relation. Ryan brought a completely different perspective to real estate investing, understanding how technology could streamline property management while reducing costs and improving tenant satisfaction. His lean frame and quiet intensity contrasted sharply with the gregarious personalities that dominated most real estate networking events, but his insights about digital marketing for rentals and automated tenant screening processes proved invaluable for growing my business efficiently. Our relationship developed gradually through shared interests in hiking Portland's extensive trail system and exploring the city's legendary food truck scene. Ryan's practical approach to problem-solving complemented my intuitive understanding of market opportunities, creating a partnership that strengthened both our personal and professional lives. He had grown up in a working-class family that valued education and hard work but had never accumulated significant wealth, giving him an appreciation for my success that my own family seemed incapable of expressing. By the time grandmother Maggie's health began declining 18 months ago, Carol received Maggie's jewelry collection and $50,000 in cash, while Dad inherited Maggie's antique ship models and a similar monetary gift. These bequests generated polite expressions of gratitude that masked obvious disappointment about the relatively small amounts. Though both parents remained focused on learning about their daughter's inheritance rather than dwelling on their own modest gifts. Ashley's bequest was read next, and the initial description seemed to confirm everyone's expectations about her role as primary heir. Patricia announced that Ashley would inherit the family home's furnishings, Maggie's extensive book collection, and a trust fund worth $300,000 that would provide steady income for life. The dollar amount was substantial enough to generate excited smiles from Ashley and Brad, though the mention of a trust fund rather than outright ownership created the first hint that something unexpected might be developing. The confusion deepened when Patricia continued reading, explaining that Ashley's inheritance was specifically structured to prevent access to principal amounts and limit annual distributions to conservative investment returns. The trust fund would provide security but not the liquid capital that Ashley had expected to use for business expansion and major investment. Her confident expression began shifting toward concern as she processed the implications of receiving steady income rather than controllable wealth that could be leveraged for larger opportunity. Brad's corporate finance background allowed him to quickly calculate the practical limitations of Ashley's inheritance, recognizing that trust fund income would support comfortable living but wouldn't provide the investment capital necessary for the ambitious expansion plans they had discussed. The realization that Ashley's inheritance was designed for security rather than wealth building created visible tension as they exchanged glances that communicated shared disappointment about the unexpected restriction. The final and most shocking revelation came when Patricia announced the distribution of Maggie's primary assets, the Lake Oswego mansion, the real estate business, and the investment portfolio that represented the bulk of her accumulated wealth. Instead of following the expected pattern of leaving everything to the older daughter, Maggie had chosen to bequeath these major assets to me, recognizing what she described in the will as my demonstrated entrepreneurial ability and practical understanding of real estate investment principles. The silence that followed this announcement stretched beyond awkward into devastating, as Ashley processed the complete reversal of her expectations. Her face cycled through expressions of confusion, disbelief, and growing anger as the reality of her situation became undeniable. The inheritance she had counted on, planned around, and discussed confidently for weeks, had been awarded to the sister everyone had dismissed as irresponsible and unfocused. The trust fund that she had received, while substantial, represented a fraction of the total estate value and provided none of the investment flexibility that would enable significant wealth building. Carol's reaction was immediate and explosive, her voice rising as she demanded explanations for what she characterized as obviously unfair treatment of her older daughter. She cited Ashley's educational achievements, professional success, and responsible approach to financial management as evidence that Maggie had made a serious error in judgment. Her arguments became increasingly emotional as she struggled to reconcile this unexpected outcome with her fundamental beliefs about family hierarchy and deserved rewards for traditional accomplishment. Ashley's initial shock transformed into calculated analysis as her legal training kicked in and she began considering options for challenging the will's validity. She questioned Patricia about Maggie's mental capacity during the will's preparation, the presence of witnesses during signing, and any evidence of undue influence that might have affected the estate distribution. Her inquiries carried the professional precision of someone searching for legal vulnerabilities that could be exploited to overturn unwanted outcomes. Patricia's responses demolished these potential challenges with the thoroughness of an experienced estate attorney who had anticipated exactly these questions. She produced medical records documenting Maggie's cognitive clarity throughout the will preparation process, witness statements from multiple professionals who had observed the signing ceremony, and detailed records of meetings where Maggie had explained her reasoning for the inheritance decision. The documentation was comprehensive enough to withstand any legal challenge, regardless of the emotional disappointment it generated. Brad attempted to mediate the situation by suggesting that family members should focus on maintaining relationships rather than dwelling on inheritance details that couldn't be changed. His diplomatic approach reflected both genuine concern about family unity and practical recognition that antagonizing me would complicate any future negotiations about estate assets. The corporate experience that made him valuable in business settings also enabled him to read situations and adjust strategies based on changing circumstances and power dynamics. Ryan remained silent throughout these exchanges, understanding that his role was to provide emotional support rather than participate in family discussions about private financial matters. His cybersecurity background made him naturally observant about details and patterns that others missed, skills that would prove crucial in the coming weeks as Ashley's disappointment evolved into something much more dangerous than simple resentment about inheritance distribution. The meeting concluded with Patricia providing each family member with copies of relevant documentation and contact information for financial advisors who could assist with managing inherited assets. Her professional demeanor remained consistent despite the obvious tension and disappointment that filled the conference room. The legal procedures had been completed successfully regardless of their emotional impact, and her responsibility was to ensure proper estate distribution rather than manage family relationships that inheritance decisions might complicate. During the drive home from Patricia's office, the weight of my unexpected inheritance began settling into practical considerations about managing assets that would require immediate attention and long-term strategic planning. The Lake Oswego mansion alone represented a significant responsibility requiring maintenance staff, security systems, and utility costs that exceeded the operating expenses of my entire current property portfolio. The real estate business would need active management to maintain the reputation and client relationships that Maggie had spent decades building. The investment portfolio required sophisticated financial knowledge to preserve value while generating returns that would support the lifestyle that such wealth enabled. More challenging than these practical concerns was the emotional reality of inheriting wealth that had been built through someone else's lifetime of work and sacrifice. Maggie's success represented decades of 12-hour days, calculated risks, and strategic decisions that had created something substantial from modest beginning. The responsibility of preserving and growing this legacy felt overwhelming despite my confidence in the real estate skills that had qualified me for this unexpected inheritance. Ashley's reaction to the inheritance announcement had been predictably intense, but the controlled anger in her expression suggested that disappointment was evolving into something more strategic and potentially dangerous. Her legal background provided knowledge about challenging estate decisions, but it also offered insight into methods for pursuing outcomes that litigation couldn't achieve. The combination of her professional skills, financial desperation, and personality traits that had always prioritized her own interests above family relationships created a situation that required careful monitoring and defensive preparation. The following weeks brought a series of awkward family interactions as everyone adjusted to the new reality of inheritance distribution that had completely reversed expected power dynamics. Ashley's attempts to maintain normal relationships were undermined by obvious resentment about the outcome and transparent efforts to gather information about my plans for managing inherited assets. Her questions about my intentions for the family business and the Lake Oswego property carried undertones, suggesting she hoped to identify opportunities for benefiting from assets she felt should have been hers originally. Carol's support for Ashley's position remained unwavering despite the legal finality of Maggie's decisions, leading to conversations that questioned my qualifications for managing complex assets and suggested that family harmony would benefit from more equitable distribution of inherited wealth. These discussions occurred during traditional family dinners that became increasingly uncomfortable as underlying tensions surfaced through seemingly innocent comments about responsibility, fairness, and the importance of maintaining family businesses within appropriate hands. Meanwhile, my real estate portfolio continued requiring the same attention and strategic thinking that had generated success during the previous 3 years. The rental properties needed ongoing maintenance, tenant management, and market analysis that would guide future investment decisions. The income from these assets provided financial independence that made inheritance management less pressured, though the scale of Maggie's estate required learning new skills and developing relationships with financial professionals who specialized in managing substantial wealth. Ryan's support during this period proved invaluable as I navigated the complex transition from modest business owner to major estate inheritor. His practical approach to problem-solving helped me develop systems for managing increased responsibilities while maintaining the hands-on involvement that had made my original investments successful. His cybersecurity expertise also provided perspective on protecting assets from various threats, advice that would prove prophetic as Ashley's disappointment transformed into active planning for reversing the inheritance outcome through methods that legal challenges couldn't accomplish. The first month after the will reading passed without major incidents, though subtle signs suggested that Ashley's acceptance of the inheritance distribution was more strategic than genuine. Her legal research into estate challenges had apparently convinced her that direct litigation offered little chance of success, leading to a shift in approach that focused on longer-term strategies for achieving desired outcomes. The change in her demeanor from explosive anger to calculated calm indicated that disappointment was evolving into systematic planning that would require vigilance to detect and counter effectively. 3 weeks after learning about her limited inheritance, Ashley made the decision that would transform family disappointment into mortal danger, though the full implications of her choice wouldn't become apparent until much later. Her research had expanded beyond legal challenges into alternative methods for resolving situations where conventional approaches offered insufficient results. The combination of her desperate financial situation, her narcissistic inability to accept permanent defeat, and her access to resources that most people couldn't imagine would soon create threats that required survival skills rather than legal strategies to overcome success. The discovery that would change everything happened on a rainy Thursday evening in November, 6 weeks after the will reading had shattered Ashley's expectations and transformed our family dynamics forever. I was working late in my Pearl District condo, reviewing financial projections for a potential apartment complex acquisition in Southeast Portland, when Ryan returned from his downtown office with an expression that immediately commanded my attention. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by something between concern and barely controlled anger, emotions that his analytical personality rarely displayed so openly. Ryan had been conducting routine cybersecurity updates for several of his consulting clients when he stumbled across digital breadcrumbs that led to a discovery neither of us could have anticipated. His work involved monitoring dark web activities that might threaten his clients' data security, a process that required specialized software and techniques for accessing encrypted networks where illegal transactions occurred beyond the reach of conventional law enforcement. During this routine monitoring, he had identified unusual activity originating from an IP address that his tracking software eventually traced back to Ashley's law firm. The initial discovery seemed innocuous enough, just another corporate network that might have been compromised by hackers seeking financial information or client data that could be sold on black market. Ryan's professional protocols required investigating any potential security breaches that involved his client's business partners or professional contacts, a standard procedure that had prevented several costly data theft incidents in the past. His forensic analysis revealed that someone using Ashley's firm's network had been accessing encrypted communication platforms specifically designed for arranging illegal services that couldn't be purchased through conventional channels. The deeper Ryan dug into the digital trail, the more disturbing the pattern became. The network activity showed systematic research into contract killing services, detailed price comparisons between different providers, and eventually actual communications with individuals who advertised their willingness to commit murder for payment. The communications used sophisticated encryption and anonymization techniques that demonstrated both technical knowledge and careful planning to avoid detection by law enforcement agencies that monitored such platforms. Most shocking was the discovery that these communications had escalated beyond mere research into active negotiations with a specific individual who operated under the username Tank PDX and offered elimination services throughout the Pacific Northwest region. The message history revealed a systematic discussion of target details, payment methods, and timing preferences that left no doubt about the serious intent behind these communications. The person arranging these services had provided specific information about my daily routines, property locations, and personal relationships that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of my life. Ryan's cybersecurity expertise allowed him to decrypt enough of the communication history to understand that a substantial down payment had already been transferred through cryptocurrency transactions, designed to be untraceable by conventional banking systems. The payments totaled nearly $50,000, an amount that demonstrated both serious commitment to the planned assassination and access to significant financial resources. The timeline indicated that these arrangements had been developing for several weeks, meaning that while our family had been navigating post-inheritance tensions through awkward dinners and forced conversations, Ashley had been systematically planning my murder. The target details provided to the hired killer included photographs of me taken during normal daily activities, maps of my regular hiking routes in Forest Park, schedules of my property management visits, and descriptions of my vehicle that would enable identification and tracking. The level of surveillance required to gather this information indicated that Ashley had been monitoring my movements for weeks, possibly using private investigators or conducting the surveillance herself during times when I thought we were simply having normal family interaction. Most terrifying was the discovery that the assassination had been scheduled for the following weekend during a hiking trip that Ryan and I had planned to Mount Hood, a location that would provide perfect cover for making my death appear accidental. The plan involved creating a scenario where I would appear to have fallen from a cliff during challenging weather conditions, a death that would be tragic but not suspicious enough to warrant extensive investigation. The killer had been provided with detailed information about our planned route, timing, and the specific location where the accident would occur. Ryan's hands shook slightly as he showed me the printed evidence of Ashley's communications with the hired killer, pages of encrypted messages that spelled out the systematic planning for my elimination. His voice carried a combination of professional outrage about the security violations and personal fury about the threat to someone he loved. The discovery represented not just a betrayal by my sister but a level of evil that neither of us had imagined possible within our family context. The immediate question became what to do with this information and how to protect ourselves from a threat that was scheduled to materialize within days. Contacting law enforcement seemed like the obvious choice, but Ryan's experience with cybersecurity investigations had taught him that digital evidence from dark web sources often faced legal challenges that could compromise prosecution. The encryption methods used in these communications might make the evidence inadmissible in court, particularly if it had been obtained through techniques that defense attorneys could characterize as illegal hacking. More importantly, alerting law enforcement would give Ashley advance warning that her plan had been discovered, potentially prompting her to accelerate the timeline or change methods in ways that would be harder to detect and counter. Her legal background provided sophisticated understanding of criminal justice procedures that could help her evade consequences even if the evidence was sufficient for arrest and prosecution. The combination of her professional connections, financial resources, and intimate knowledge of legal systems created advantages that would be difficult to overcome through conventional law enforcement channels. Ryan suggested an alternative approach that would use his cybersecurity expertise to gather additional evidence while setting up counter-surveillance that could document Ashley's criminal activities in ways that would be legally admissible and professionally devastating. His plan involved monitoring her continued communications with the hired killer while documenting the financial transactions and creating a comprehensive record of her criminal conspiracy that could be presented to authorities when the timing would maximize consequences and minimize her ability to escape justice. The psychological impact of discovering that my own sister was planning my murder created emotional trauma that was difficult to process even with clear evidence of the threat. Ashley and I had never been close, and recent inheritance tensions had created obvious conflicts, but the leap from family disappointment to contract killing represented a level of sociopathy that challenged my fundamental understanding of human relationships. The sister who had shared childhood experiences and family traditions had become someone willing to commit fratricide for financial gain, a transformation that was both terrifying and profoundly sad. During the next 48 hours, Ryan's continued monitoring of Ashley's digital communications revealed additional details about her planning that made the threat even more immediate and dangerous. The hired killer, who had been identified through Ryan's research as Marcus Rodriguez, an ex-convict with multiple arrests for violent crimes, had confirmed his availability for the weekend assassination and was making final preparations for what he believed would be a straightforward contract killing disguised as a hiking accident. The communications also revealed that Ashley had developed contingency plans in case the initial attempt failed or raised suspicions that might complicate her inheritance goals. These backup strategies included alternative methods for eliminating Meagle while maintaining plausible deniability about her involvement, suggestions that indicated her commitment to murder was absolute rather than impulsive. Her legal training had enabled her to identify weaknesses in potential investigations and develop approaches that would minimize her exposure to criminal consequences. Most disturbing was the discovery that Ashley had researched my relationship with Ryan and identified him as a potential witness who might need to be eliminated if he became suspicious about my death or possessed information that could threaten her plan. The communications with Marcus Rodriguez included discussions about expanding the contract to include Ryan if circumstances required removing additional obstacles to Ashley's inheritance security. This revelation transformed the threat from a personal danger into something that endangered the person I loved most, creating urgency that made passive defensive measures insufficient for protecting our lives. Ryan's analysis of the cryptocurrency transactions revealed that Ashley had access to financial resources that exceeded what her law firm's salary could support, suggesting either hidden assets or financial backing from her husband Brad that enabled funding for professional assassination services. The payments had been structured to avoid detection by banking regulations while providing the substantial amounts that experienced killers demanded for high-quality work. This financial sophistication indicated that Ashley's planning had been thorough and professional rather than desperate or amateurish. The timeline for the planned assassination was accelerating as the weekend approached, creating pressure to develop and implement counter-strategies that would neutralize the threat while positioning ourselves to expose Ashley's criminal activities in ways that would destroy her both legally and professionally. Ryan's cybersecurity expertise provided tools for manipulating digital communications and creating false information that could be used to disrupt the assassination plan while gathering additional evidence of Ashley's criminal intent. The plan that Ryan developed involved several coordinated elements designed to protect our lives while creating opportunities to document Ashley's crimes in ways that would ensure legal consequences. The first component involved intercepting and altering communications between Ashley and Marcus Rodriguez to provide false information about our weekend plans, sending the hired killer to locations where he would be under surveillance rather than positioned to commit murder. This digital manipulation would buy time while creating evidence of the criminal conspiracy that could be documented by law enforcement. Simultaneously, Ryan arranged for professional security personnel to monitor our actual locations during the weekend, while recording any attempts by Marcus Rodriguez or other individuals to locate and harm us. These security measures would provide both physical protection and video evidence that could be used in criminal prosecutions, while demonstrating that Ashley's plans had progressed beyond mere conspiracy into attempted murder. The documentation would be comprehensive enough to overcome any legal challenges that Ashley's attorneys might raise about evidence admissibility or entrapment defenses. The most sophisticated element of Ryan's plan involved using his cybersecurity access to document Ashley's financial transactions and communication history in ways that would be legally admissible while revealing the full scope of her criminal activity. This evidence gathering would create a comprehensive record of premeditation and criminal intent that would support serious felony charges including conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation of murder, and potentially federal charges related to interstate commerce and criminal service. Ryan's professional network included contacts within law enforcement cybercrime units, who could be trusted to handle sensitive evidence appropriately while ensuring that Ashley's legal connections wouldn't compromise the investigation. These relationships had been developed through his legitimate consulting work and provided access to resources that could match Ashley's advantages within the legal system. The timing of evidence presentation would be coordinated to maximize legal impact while minimizing her opportunities for destroying evidence or fleeing jurisdiction. During the weekend that Ashley believed would witness my death, Ryan and I implemented our counter-surveillance plan while documenting every aspect of the criminal conspiracy that her greed and entitlement had created. The hired killer Marcus Rodriguez was successfully misdirected to remote locations where law enforcement teams recorded his activities and intentions, gathering evidence that would support multiple felony charges against both him and Ashley. The digital communications that Ashley believed were secure were being monitored and recorded in real time, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence that demonstrated her role in orchestrating the planned murder. The psychological satisfaction of turning Ashley's murderous plan against her was intense, though tempered by sadness about the destruction of family relationships that her choices had made inevitable. The sister who had always competed with me for parental approval had escalated that competition to literal life and death stakes, destroying any possibility of future reconciliation while creating consequences that would define the rest of her life. Her inability to accept inheritance decisions that she considered unfair
had driven her to cross moral and legal boundaries that would result in decades of imprisonment and complete destruction of the privileged lifestyle she had fought so desperately to maintain. The evidence that Ryan gathered during that weekend created an overwhelming case against Ashley that included recordings of her communications with Marcus Rodriguez, documentation of financial payments for assassination service, surveillance footage of the hired killer attempting to locate and harm me, and digital records that established a clear timeline of criminal planning and intent. The comprehensive nature of this evidence made conviction virtually certain while ensuring that Ashley's legal expertise would be insufficient to avoid consequences for her choices. When law enforcement arrested Ashley at her Lake Oswego home on Monday morning, she was completely unprepared for the revelation that her supposedly secret criminal activities had been under surveillance by cybersecurity professionals working with federal investigators.
Their initial disbelief gave way to shock as the evidence became public through court filings that detailed the systematic planning Ashley had undertaken to eliminate me and claim inheritance assets that she considered rightfully hers. The family reputation that they had spent decades building was destroyed overnight by Ashley's criminal choices. The news coverage of Ashley's arrest and the details of her murder-for-hire scheme created a sensation that dominated Portland media for weeks, while generating national attention about inheritance disputes that escalated to criminal violence. The story combined elements of family betrayal, substantial wealth, and sophisticated criminal planning that captured public interest, while providing cautionary lessons about the dangers of greed and entitlement. My role as the intended victim who had discovered and thwarted the assassination plot made me a reluctant public figure whose privacy was invaded by reporters seeking additional details about the case. The practical implications of Ashley's arrest included immediate security concerns, as law enforcement investigated whether she had developed additional plans for harming me or had contacted other criminal associates who might continue pursuing the original contract. The threats to my safety would continue until Marcus Rodriguez and any potential accomplices were arrested and the full scope of the criminal conspiracy was understood. Ryan's cybersecurity monitoring would need to continue indefinitely to detect any new threats that might emerge from Ashley's criminal networks. The legal proceedings that followed Ashley's arrest would take months to resolve, though the overwhelming evidence that Ryan had gathered made the outcome virtually certain. Her conviction on multiple felony charges would result in decades of imprisonment, while eliminating any possibility that she could benefit from Maggie's inheritance or threaten my safety in the future. The justice system that she had spent her career manipulating would ultimately deliver consequences that matched the severity of her criminal choices. More satisfying than Ashley's legal consequences was the recognition that I had survived her murderous plot through a combination of luck, Ryan's expertise, and my own instincts about the danger that her personality had always represented. The inheritance that she had tried to claim through murder would continue funding the real estate investments and business growth that Maggie had intended to support. Ashley's greed had ultimately ensured that she would never benefit from wealth that her criminal actions had forfeited permanently. The transformation from potential victim to empowered survivor represented a fundamental shift in how I understood my own strength and capability. The woman who had always been dismissed as the lesser daughter had not only inherited substantial wealth, but had also successfully defended that inheritance against the most extreme threats that family dysfunction could create. Ashley's arrest demonstrated that intelligence, preparation, and moral clarity could overcome even the most sophisticated criminal schemes, when guided by determination to protect what truly mattered. The federal courthouse in Portland buzzed with media attention as Ashley's trial date approached. 3 months after her arrest had shocked the city's legal community and shattered our family's carefully constructed reputation. The prosecution's case, built around the digital evidence that Ryan had meticulously gathered, was so comprehensive that even Ashley's high-powered defense team acknowledged the near impossibility of avoiding conviction on the most serious charges. The woman who had once commanded respect in Portland's legal circles now faced the prospect of spending the rest of her life in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation of homicide. The media coverage had transformed me from a private real estate investor into a reluctant public figure whose survival story captured national attention. Reporters consistently requested interviews about the emotional impact of discovering that my own sister had hired a professional killer to eliminate me for inheritance money. The requests came daily through phone calls, emails, and unexpected visits to my Pearl District condo, creating privacy invasions that required security measures and careful coordination with law enforcement to maintain my safety during the ongoing legal proceeding. Ryan's cybersecurity expertise had proven invaluable not only for exposing Ashley's criminal conspiracy, but also for protecting our digital privacy from journalists who used sophisticated techniques to gather information about people thrust into public attention. His monitoring systems detected multiple attempts to hack into my personal accounts, access my business records, and track my daily movements through GPS and social media surveillance. The same skills that had saved my life were now essential for maintaining the security and privacy necessary to continue normal business operations, while the trial dominated local news coverage. The real estate portfolio that I had built during the 3 years before Maggie's death continued requiring active management, despite the disruptions created by Ashley's criminal activities and the subsequent media attention. Property maintenance, tenant relationships, and market analysis couldn't be postponed because of family drama or legal proceedings, and the income generated by these investments remained essential for supporting my lifestyle and funding expansion opportunities. The business disciplines that had earned Maggie's respect and qualified me for inheritance were the same skills that enabled me to maintain professional focus while navigating personal trauma and public scrutiny. Managing Maggie's inherited assets presented challenges that were both more complex and more rewarding than anything I had previously experienced in real estate investment. The Lake Oswego mansion required a full-time staff of groundskeepers, housekeepers, and security personnel whose salaries exceeded the gross rental income from my original property portfolio. The Harper & Associates real estate business demanded immediate attention to maintain client relationships and market position that decades of reputation building had established. The investment portfolio included stocks, bonds, and commercial properties that required sophisticated financial knowledge to preserve value while generating returns appropriate for such substantial wealth. The transition from managing a modest real estate portfolio to overseeing a multi-million-dollar estate felt overwhelming initially, but the fundamental principles remained consistent with what I had learned through smaller-scale investment. Property values still reflected location, condition, and market demand regardless of price ranges. Tenant relationships still required fairness, responsiveness, and clear communication whether dealing with modest apartment rentals or luxury commercial lease. Financial analysis still involved calculating risk, return, and opportunity costs, whether evaluating $1,000 repairs or $1,000,000 acquisition. Ryan's support during this period of rapid business expansion was instrumental in developing systems that could handle increased complexity while maintaining the hands-on approach that had made my original investments successful. His technology background enabled us to implement property management software, financial tracking systems, and security protocols that streamlined operations, while providing the detailed monitoring necessary for managing substantial assets. His partnership transformed what could have been overwhelming responsibility into manageable growth that honored Maggie's legacy while building toward even greater long-term success. The most satisfying aspect of inheriting Maggie's wealth was the opportunity to expand into real estate development projects that could make meaningful contributions to Portland's housing challenges while generating substantial returns on investment. The combination of inherited capital and established business relationships enabled me to pursue mixed-income housing developments that provided quality homes for working families while creating long-term wealth through property appreciation and rental income. These projects represented the kind of socially responsible investing that Maggie had advocated, but had been unable to pursue due to the capital requirements and regulatory complexity involved in development work. The first major development project involved purchasing a 12-acre site in southeast Portland that had been zoned for mixed-use development, but had remained undeveloped due to environmental remediation requirements that scared away conventional development. My analysis indicated that the environmental issues were manageable with current technology, while the location offered excellent access to public transportation and employment centers that would make affordable housing extremely attractive to potential residents. The project required 18 months of planning and permit acquisition, but the projected returns justified the complexity while addressing genuine community needs for workforce housing. Working with architects, engineers, and contractors on this scale required negotiation skills and project management capabilities that extended far beyond the renovation work I had done on smaller properties. The development process involved coordinating dozens of professionals while navigating city planning requirements, environmental regulations, and financing arrangements that could make or break the entire project. The learning curve was steep, but the intellectual challenge and potential impact made the effort worthwhile while providing practical education that would support even larger projects in the future. The media attention surrounding Ashley's trial created unexpected opportunities for discussing real estate development and affordable housing issues that were important to Portland's future growth. Journalists who initially sought sensational details about family betrayal and murder plots gradually became interested in my business activities and perspective on housing policy. These interviews provided platforms for advocating development approaches that balanced profitability with social responsibility, perspectives that resonated with readers concerned about housing affordability and urban planning challenge. Ashley's trial began on a cold February morning with jury selection that lasted 3 days as attorneys sought jurors who could evaluate evidence objectively despite extensive media coverage of the case. The prosecution team, led by Assistant United States Attorney Sarah Chen, had organized their evidence presentation to tell a chronological story of Ashley's progression from inheritance disappointment to criminal conspiracy. The defense strategy, managed by Portland's most expensive criminal attorney, focused on challenging the admissibility of digital evidence, while arguing that Ashley's communications with Marcus Rodriguez represented fantasy rather than serious criminal intent. Ryan was scheduled to testify as the prosecution's key witness regarding the digital evidence that had exposed Ashley's criminal activity. His cybersecurity expertise qualified him to explain complex technical concepts to jurors, while his personal relationship with me provided emotional context that humanized the intended victim of Ashley's murder plot. The defense team's cross-examination would focus on the methods he had used to gather evidence, attempting to characterize his actions as illegal hacking that violated Ashley's privacy rights. My own testimony was anticipated to be the emotional centerpiece of the prosecution's case, providing jurors with direct insight into the family dynamics that had motivated Ashley's criminal choices, while describing the psychological impact of discovering that my sister had hired someone to kill me. The defense would attempt to portray me as vindictive and manipulative, someone who had unfairly received inheritance that properly belonged to Ashley and who had orchestrated her arrest to eliminate competition for family wealth. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal professionals, and community members whose interest in the case reflected both the shocking nature of the charges and the prominence of the families involved. Ashley sat at the defense table wearing a conservative gray suit that was designed to project respectability and remorse, though her expression remained coldly defiant throughout the opening statement. Brad attended each day of the trial despite their divorce proceedings, perhaps out of genuine concern for his former wife or possibly to protect his own reputation from association with her criminal activity. The prosecution's presentation began with financial records that established Ashley's motive for wanting me dead, demonstrating how Maggie's inheritance decision had created desperate circumstances that drove her toward criminal solutions. Bank statements showed that Ashley and Brad's lifestyle required substantially more income than their professional salaries provided, creating financial pressures that made inheritance money essential for maintaining their social position and investment plan. The debt obligations and mortgage payments on their Lake Oswego home were consuming most of their monthly income, leaving little room for the luxury expenses that their social circle considered normal. Digital evidence presented by Ryan methodically documented Ashley's research into contract killing services, her communications with Marcus Rodriguez, and the cryptocurrency payments that demonstrated her serious commitment to having me murdered. The jury listened with obvious shock as recordings of Ashley's conversations were played, her voice clearly audible as she provided details about my daily routines and discussed payment schedules for assassination services. The technical explanations that Ryan provided about dark web communications and encryption methods helped jurors understand the sophisticated planning that Ashley's legal background had enabled. The testimony of Marcus Rodriguez, who had accepted a plea bargain in exchange for cooperation with prosecutors, provided chilling details about Ashley's determination to have me killed during the planned hiking trip. His criminal history and obvious comfort with violence made him a compelling witness despite his credibility limitations, particularly when he described Ashley's specific instructions about making my death appear accidental. The recorded conversations between them revealed Ashley's legal expertise being applied to criminal planning, as she advised him about avoiding evidence that could link them to the murder. My testimony occupied 2 full days of the trial as I described the family dynamics that had shaped Ashley's resentment about inheritance distribution and the emotional trauma of discovering that she had hired someone to kill me. The prosecutor guided me through details about my relationship with Maggie, my real estate business development, and the discovery of Ashley's murder plot, creating a narrative that demonstrated both motive and impact. The defense attorney's cross-examination attempted to portray me as manipulative and undeserving of inheritance, but the evidence of Ashley's criminal actions made these attacks seem desperate and inappropriate. The defense team's closing argument focused on characterizing Ashley's actions as momentary emotional breakdown rather than calculated criminal conspiracy, arguing that her communications with Marcus Rodriguez represented venting frustration rather than serious murder planning. They suggested that the digital evidence had been gathered through illegal means, and that Ashley's constitutional rights had been violated through surveillance that exceeded legal boundaries. The prosecution's rebuttal demolished these arguments by demonstrating the systematic nature of Ashley's planning and the legitimate security concerns that had justified the investigation method. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation of homicide, and federal charges related to interstate commerce in criminal services. Ashley's face remained expressionless as the verdicts were read, though her defense attorney's immediate motion for appeal indicated that legal challenges would continue despite the overwhelming evidence against her. The federal sentencing guidelines for her convictions indicated that she would likely spend the rest of her life in prison, effectively ending any possibility that she could threaten my safety or benefit from criminal activity. The sentencing hearing 2 months later provided an opportunity for me to address the court about the impact of Ashley's crimes on my life and family relationship. I spoke about the betrayal of discovering that someone I had grown up with was willing to have me murdered for money, the ongoing security concerns that her criminal associations had created, and the destruction of family bonds that her choices had made irreversible. The judge's comments during sentencing reflected his shock at the cold-blooded nature of Ashley's planning and the sophistication of her criminal conspiracy. Ashley received 3 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, ensuring that she would never again threaten my safety or anyone else's life for financial gain. Marcus Rodriguez received a 25-year sentence that reflected his cooperation with prosecutors while acknowledging his role in the murder conspiracy. The sentences provided closure for the legal proceedings while creating permanent consequences that matched the severity of their criminal choices. The conclusion of Ashley's trial allowed me to focus entirely on building the business empire that Maggie's inheritance had made possible while honoring her legacy through socially responsible development projects. The mixed-income housing development in southeast Portland had been approved during the trial period and was beginning construction with projected completion in 18 months. The success of this initial project would provide both financial returns and community impact that would support even larger development initiatives in the future. The real estate business that I had inherited from Maggie required modernization and expansion to maintain its competitive position in Portland's evolving market. The integration of technology systems, updated marketing approaches, and expanded service offerings attracted new clients while preserving the reputation for excellence that decades of quality work had established. The combination of inherited client relationships and my own industry experience created opportunities for growth that honored Maggie's legacy while building toward future success that would exceed even her remarkable achievement. Ryan and I were married 6 months after Ashley's sentencing, in a private ceremony at the Lake Oswego mansion that focused on our commitment to each other rather than the public attention that our relationship had attracted during the trial. The wedding represented not only our personal happiness, but also the triumph of authentic partnership over the toxic family dynamics that had nearly destroyed my life. Our relationship had been tested by extreme circumstances and had emerged stronger through shared challenges that most couples never face. The mansion that had once represented Maggie's success became our home base for both personal life and business operations,
providing space for entertaining clients and hosting community events while maintaining the privacy necessary for normal family life. The extensive grounds offered opportunities for gardening and outdoor activities that provided relaxation from business pressures, while the home office space accommodated the administrative requirements of managing substantial real estate holdings. My relationship with Carol and Dad evolved slowly as they processed the reality of Ashley's criminal activities and began to understand that their favoritism had contributed to creating the entitlement that drove her to attempt murder. The family dinners that had once been dominated by comparisons between Ashley and me were replaced by conversations about business development, community involvement, and the positive impact that responsible wealth management could have on Portland's future growth. Their acceptance of my success felt genuine rather than forced, though the shadow of Ashley's crimes would always influence family dynamics. The community recognition that followed the trial's conclusion included invitations to speak at real estate conferences, serve on nonprofit boards, and participate in city planning discussions about affordable housing development. These opportunities provided platforms for sharing lessons learned through my business experience while contributing to policy discussions that could influence Portland's future growth pattern. The visibility that had initially felt like an invasion of privacy gradually became a tool for advancing causes that were important to community well-being. The real estate portfolio that I managed continued expanding through strategic acquisitions and development projects that generated both financial returns and community benefit. The combination of inherited capital and earned expertise enabled me to pursue projects that individual investors couldn't afford while maintaining the hands-on involvement that ensured quality outcomes. The business growth provided employment for dozens of people while contributing to Portland's housing supply and economic development. 5 years after Ashley's sentencing, the transformation of my life from potential murder victim to successful developer and community leader felt complete, though the journey continued through new challenges and opportunities that each success created. The woman who had once been dismissed as the family disappointment had built an empire that exceeded anything Ashley could have achieved through legal means, while creating positive impact that would benefit Portland for generations. The inheritance that Ashley had tried to claim through murder had become the foundation for achievements that honored Maggie's legacy while building something uniquely my own. The security systems that Ryan maintained continued protecting us from potential threats, while his cybersecurity consulting business grew through referrals from the law enforcement contacts he had developed during Ashley's investigation. Our partnership represented the kind of authentic collaboration that created success for both individuals, while building something greater than either could achieve alone. The love that had sustained us through Ashley's murder plot had grown stronger through shared triumph over adversity that most relationships never survive. The Lake Oswego mansion hosted annual charity events that raised funds for affordable housing development, while bringing together Portland's business and political leaders to discuss solutions for the city's most pressing challenges. These gatherings honored Maggie's memory while advancing causes that reflected values of social responsibility and community investment. The wealth that Ashley had coveted for selfish purposes had become a tool for creating positive change that would outlast any individual's lifetime. The story of Ashley's attempt to have me murdered for inheritance money became a cautionary tale that was taught in law schools and business programs as an example of how greed and entitlement could destroy both families and individuals. The case study elements included analysis of the digital evidence gathering techniques, the family dynamics that contributed to criminal behavior, and the legal precedents that were established through the prosecution. My survival and subsequent success provided inspiration for others facing family betrayal or life-threatening situations that required courage and strategic thinking to overcome. The real estate development projects that grew from Maggie's inheritance continued expanding throughout the Pacific Northwest as my reputation for quality work and community focus attracted investment partners and government support for larger initiatives. The mixed-income housing developments provided affordable homes for working families while generating returns that funded additional projects in a self-sustaining cycle of growth and community benefit. The business model proved that responsible development could achieve both financial success and social impact when guided by principles that prioritized long-term value over short-term profit. The relationship with Ryan deepened through shared challenges and successes that tested and strengthened our partnership while providing foundation for building a family that would carry forward the values that had enabled us to survive and thrive despite extraordinary threats. Our children would grow up understanding that authentic success came through hard work, integrity, and contribution to community welfare rather than through inheritance or criminal shortcuts that ultimately destroyed everything they were intended to achieve. The final lesson from Ashley's murderous betrayal was that family relationships based on competition and favoritism created toxic dynamics that could escalate to life-threatening consequences when substantial wealth was involved. The healthy boundaries that I had learned to maintain protected both my safety and my success while enabling relationships with family members who demonstrated genuine care and respect. The woman who had survived her sister's murder plot had become someone who understood that authentic family was chosen rather than inherited, created through loyalty and love rather than shared genetics and proximity. 10 years have passed since Ashley's arrest transformed my life from a potential murder victim into one of Portland's most influential real estate developers, and the empire I've built extends far beyond anything Maggie could have envisioned when she made the inheritance decision that nearly cost me my life. The Lake Oswego mansion that once represented the pinnacle of family wealth now serves as headquarters for Harper Development Group, a company that has revolutionized affordable housing throughout the Pacific Northwest while generating returns that have multiplied my inherited wealth by factors that still surprise financial analysts who track my business activity. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my executive office illuminates architectural models of development projects spanning from Seattle to San Francisco.
The project required 7 years of planning, financing, and construction, while navigating political obstacles created by established developers who viewed affordable housing as a threat to their profit margins and property values in surrounding areas. The development represents culmination of strategies that began with my first property investment 15 years ago, proving that systematic approach to real estate can create sustainable solutions for housing affordability while building wealth that enables even larger community impact projects. The combination of innovative financing, energy-efficient construction, and community-oriented design has attracted national attention from urban planners and policymakers, seeking replicable models for addressing housing crises that affect cities throughout the country. The children's voices echoing from the mansion's family wing remind me of the personal victory that Ashley's criminal failure enabled, the loving family that Ryan and I have created, despite the trauma of discovering that my sister was willing to commit murder for inheritance money. Our 8-year-old daughter Emma and 6-year-old son Michael bear names that honor positive family memories while creating new traditions based on authenticity and mutual support rather than competition and favoritism that characterized my childhood experiences. Emma demonstrates entrepreneurial instincts that remind me of my own childhood creativity, designing elaborate fairy houses from natural materials and organizing neighborhood art shows that raise money for animal shelters and environmental causes that capture her passionate attention. Her confidence reflects growing up in a household where achievements are celebrated without comparison or qualification, where failure is viewed as learning opportunity rather than evidence of inadequacy or disappointment. Michael's mechanical aptitude and problem-solving abilities mirror Ryan's analytical approach to challenges, though his interests focus on building elaborate structures from blocks and recycled materials, rather than computer systems and digital security protocol. His persistent questions about how things work and why certain solutions are more effective than others indicate intellectual curiosity that will serve him well regardless of career paths he eventually chooses to pursue. The security that our children experience represents fundamental difference from the toxic dynamics that shaped Ashley's development and mission, demonstrating how inherited wealth can be transformed into genuine family legacy when guided by values that prioritize emotional health and community contribution over status and competitive achievement. The lessons they learn about money, success, and relationships will hopefully prevent repetition of patterns that drove Ashley toward criminal choices that destroyed her life and nearly ended mine. The phone call that arrives during breakfast comes from Detective Maria Santos, the lead investigator who had coordinated Ashley's arrest and prosecution 10 years earlier, and who now serves as Portland's deputy chief of police. Her voice carries urgency that immediately captures my attention, despite the routine nature of most communications we've shared since Ashley's trial concluded with life sentences that eliminated direct threats to my safety and family security. Detective Santos explains that Ashley died 3 days ago in the federal penitentiary where she had been serving her sentence, apparently from complications related to medical conditions that had developed during her decade of incarceration. The news creates complex emotions that combine relief about permanently eliminated threat with sadness about wasted potential and destroyed family relationships that her criminal choices had made irreversible. The sister who had hired someone to kill me was finally gone, though her death felt anticlimactic, given the comprehensive victory that my survival and success had already achieved. The cause of death was listed as heart failure related to stress and poor health management, conditions that were common among long-term prisoners who struggled to adapt to institutional life after losing freedom and status that had defined their previous existence. Ashley's legal appeals had been exhausted years earlier, leaving her with no realistic hope of ever leaving prison or reclaiming any portion of the wealth she had tried to obtain through murder. Her death represented final conclusion to chapter of my life that had been effectively closed since her sentencing. Brad's reaction to his former wife's death was reportedly one of complicated grief mixed with relief that the shame and financial devastation of her criminal activities could finally be put behind him. He had remarried several years after their divorce was finalized and had rebuilt his investment banking career despite the professional damage that association with Ashley's crimes had initially created. Their children, now teenagers, had grown up largely without contact with their mother and would presumably inherit nothing from her estate, beyond painful family history and cautionary lessons about consequences of criminal choice. The notification of Ashley's death required informing Carol and Dad, conversations that remained difficult despite the decade of healing that had gradually restored functional family relationships. Their grief for Ashley was complicated by understanding that her criminal activities had represented choices rather than temporary lapses in judgment, though they continued struggling with guilt about favoritism and family dynamics that may have contributed to her sense of entitlement and willingness to pursue wealth through murder. The practical implications of Ashley's death included updating security protocols that had been maintained throughout the decades since her incarceration. Though the threats to my safety had always been considered minimal given her isolation in federal prison and lack of outside criminal associations who might have continued pursuing revenge or financial schemes, Ryan's cybersecurity monitoring had detected no suspicious activities related to Ashley or her criminal associates during the years since her sentencing, suggesting that her death truly marked end of any potential dangers related to her murder plot. The memorial service that Carol organized for Ashley was attended primarily by family members and a few longtime friends who remembered her before criminal activities destroyed her reputation and relationship. The service focused on childhood memories and early professional achievements, while carefully avoiding discussion of events that led to her imprisonment and death. The absence of legal colleagues and professional associates who had once respected her career accomplishments demonstrated how completely her criminal choices had isolated her from communities that had previously defined her identity and status. My decision to attend Ashley's memorial service was based on desire for personal closure rather than forgiveness or renewed family harmony, recognizing that some betrayals cannot be overcome despite passage of time and changed circumstance. The woman who had hired someone to kill me deserved acknowledgement as sister and family member while simultaneously being remembered as criminal, whose choices had created permanent consequences that defined rest of her abbreviated life. The eulogy that I delivered surprised family members who expected either absence or bitter condemnation, instead offering reflection on waste of potential and tragedy of choices that transformed privileged life into criminal conspiracy and ultimate destruction. My comments focused on lessons that Ashley's life offered about importance of gratitude, authentic relationships, and moral boundaries that prevent greed from overriding basic human decency. The memorial became opportunity for addressing family patterns that had contributed to toxic dynamics while affirming commitment to healthier approaches for future generations. The week following Ashley's memorial service brought renewed focus on business activities and community projects that represented positive legacy building rather than dwelling on past betrayals and criminal activities that were finally permanently resolved. The affordable housing development, that would be dedicated later in the month required final inspections and preparations for welcoming families who had been waiting years for opportunity to purchase quality homes in neighborhoods with good schools and convenient access to employment centers. The development's innovative financing model had attracted attention from federal housing officials who were seeking replicable approaches for addressing affordability crises in metropolitan areas throughout the country. The combination of public-private partnerships, energy efficiency incentive, and community ownership structures had created sustainable framework for providing quality housing at prices that working families could afford without requiring ongoing subsidies that strained municipal budgets and created long-term obligations. The success of this model had generated requests for consultation from city governments and private developers in dozens of locations where housing costs had escalated beyond reach of essential workers whose services were crucial for community functioning. The expansion of Harper Development Group into consulting and technical assistance represented natural evolution of business model that had proven successful in Pacific Northwest markets while creating opportunities for even greater community impact through knowledge sharing and collaborative development. The national recognition that had grown from successful affordable housing projects included invitations to testify before congressional committees examining housing policy and urban development strategy. These opportunities provided platforms for advocating evidence-based approaches to development that balanced market forces with community needs, demonstrating that profitable housing development could also address social challenges when guided by long-term thinking rather than short-term profit maximization. The personal satisfaction derived from this recognition was enhanced by understanding that success had been built through authentic achievement rather than inherited advantage or criminal shortcuts that ultimately destroyed everything they were intended to accomplish. The contrast between my current status and Ashley's ultimate fate provided constant reminder that ethical choices create sustainable success while criminal activities inevitably lead to destruction and permanent consequences that cannot be reversed through legal appeals or family connection. The children's questions about their Aunt Ashley's death required age-appropriate explanations about family history and moral choices that would help them understand the importance of integrity and ethical decision-making without creating fear or anxiety about family relationships. Emma's artistic temperament enabled her to process complex emotions through creative projects that explored themes of right and wrong, while Michael's analytical approach led to detailed questions about justice systems and consequences that required careful answers, balancing honesty with emotional protection. These conversations represented opportunities for teaching lessons about wealth, family, and moral responsibility that would hopefully prevent repetition of patterns that had driven Ashley toward criminal choices while encouraging our children to view inherited advantages as obligations for community service rather than entitlements for personal luxury. The values that guided our family life emphasized contribution and gratitude rather than competition and accumulation, creating foundation for healthy relationships with money and success. The dedication ceremony for the affordable housing development took place on crisp October morning with attendance from hundreds of new residents, city officials, and community leaders who recognized significance of project that would provide quality homes for working families while demonstrating sustainable approaches to development that could be replicated throughout regions. The mayor's comments acknowledged role that innovative financing and community-focused design had played in creating affordable housing without requiring ongoing public subsidy. The families who received keys to their new homes included teachers, firefighters, nurses, and other essential workers whose contributions to community well-being had been recognized through affordable homeownership opportunities that would build equity and provide stability for their children. The emotional impact of witnessing these families achieving homeownership dreams that had seemed impossible in Portland's escalated housing market provided satisfaction that exceeded any financial returns the project would generate. The architectural design of the development incorporated sustainable building practices, community gathering spaces, and educational facilities that would support resident success while creating neighborhood assets that would benefit surrounding areas through increased property values and reduced infrastructure demand. The holistic approach to community development reflected understanding that housing alone was insufficient for creating thriving neighborhoods without attention to social connections and economic opportunity. The media coverage of the dedication ceremony focused on replicable aspects of development model rather than personal story of surviving sister's murder plot, though reporters inevitably mentioned dramatic circumstances that had transformed inheritance windfall into community development empire. The narrative had evolved from sensational crime story into inspirational business case study that demonstrated how personal trauma could be transformed into positive community impact through strategic thinking and sustained commitment to social responsibility. The financial returns generated by the development exceeded projections despite affordable pricing structure, proving that responsible development could achieve both community benefit and investor profit when managed through long-term strategies rather than short-term extraction. The success attracted additional investment capital from institutional funders who recognized both social impact and financial sustainability of model that Harper Development Group had pioneered through a decade of careful planning and execution. The expansion opportunities that success had created included invitations to develop similar projects in Seattle, San Francisco, and other Pacific Coast cities where housing affordability had reached crisis levels that demanded innovative solutions. The consulting contracts that accompanied these opportunities would spread successful model while generating revenue that could fund even larger community impact projects in Portland and throughout region. The evening celebration following the dedication ceremony was held at the Lake Oswego mansion with guest list that included new homeowners, city officials, and business leaders who had supported affordable housing initiatives despite political opposition from established developers and neighborhood groups that viewed such projects as threats to existing property value. The mansion's transformation from symbol of inherited privilege into headquarters for community development represented personal journey from potential murder victim to influential business leader. Ryan's toast during the celebration acknowledged journey from survival to success, while recognizing that Ashley's criminal failure had ultimately enabled community impact that would benefit thousands of families throughout Pacific Northwest. The irony that her attempt to steal inheritance through murder had resulted in that wealth being used for affordable housing development provided poetic justice that was more satisfying than any legal punishment could have achieved. The children's participation in the celebration as junior hosts demonstrated confidence and social skills that reflected secure family environment where achievements were shared rather than hoarded, where success was measured through contribution rather than accumulation. Emma's presentation of artwork created specifically for new homeowners showed understanding that wealth carried obligations for helping others achieve their dreams and aspirations. The late-night conversation between Ryan and me after guests had departed focused on future plans that would expand community impact while maintaining family priorities that ensured our children would grow up understanding both advantages and responsibilities that substantial wealth created. The success that had grown from surviving Ashley's murder plot had created opportunities for influence that required careful consideration about how power and resources would be used for maximum positive impact. The strategic planning for Harper Development Group's next phase included expansion into educational facility development, elder care housing, and environmental restoration projects that would address multiple community needs while generating sustainable returns for continued growth. The diversification reflected understanding that real estate development was tool for community building rather than end goal in itself, means for creating positive change rather than simply accumulating additional wealth. The 10-year anniversary of Ashley's arrest and the transformation it had triggered in my life coincided with recognition that the woman who had tried to have me killed had ultimately enabled achievements that exceeded anything she could have accomplished through legal means.